Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast. I am your host, Nick McDaniel. I am joined today by a very special guest. I cannot tell you how honored I was when when we were reached out to do a little interview segment with this gentleman. It's just, I grew up watching him. I've been a fan for a long, long time. So let me go ahead and cut through the chase, and I couldn't introduce him any better than he could. So let me just say he's the world's most dangerous announcer. It is Gary Michael Cappetta. Mr. Cappetta, how are you doing today?
Now tell me, what is there dangerous about Gary Michael Cappetta? How's that possible?
Well, I'm not sure, but I was going to ask you. We'll get to the important stuff here right after this question I wanted to ask you, because didn't a good friend of yours, Mr. Jim Cornette, give you that name?
Yes, he did. It actually comes from the world's most dangerous wrestler, Dick the Bruiser, and David Letterman grew up in Indianapolis, was a huge fan of Dick the Bruiser. So when he started his talk show, he named his band the world's most dangerous band. So it's just something that's had a life of its own. And I guess it's just humorous because when you look at the ring announcer, Gary Michael Cappetta, like, I'm so conservative looking and so serious. And so Cornette is a genius, he just is. So when you hear world's most dangerous announcer and you look at that figure in the ring being dwarfed by, the wrestling giants, it's just, it just makes you chuckle.
It absolutely does. And the funniest part is, as a kid, even growing up, I always asked the same question. Why is he the world's most dangerous? Is he a black belt in karate? Is there something that I'm missing, that he's just so dangerous? But I'd heard that, the title, and I'm like, where did he get that name? And then, of course, I did hear you on the Cornette Experience, and I absolutely was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But I figured our audience.
I just keep it a secret so no one messes with me. That's what I do. I just use it to my advantage.
Absolutely. Well, now, and real quick, this is, those are the kind of stories. You're going to get a lot deeper stories than this. But one of the things we had you on for, obviously, is, you have your show that you're traveling across the country, and you do the one-man show. I always say it's a one-man show, but a lot of times you have guests, which we will actually get to here in a second. And of course, the show's Beyond Body Slams. And the reason why you're here is because October 13th, you're going to be in Conyers, Georgia, which is just literally right outside of Atlanta. It's in the metro area. October 14th, you're going to be in Tampa, Florida. 15th is Orlando. October 28th, Asbury Park, New Jersey. November 4th, Louisville, Kentucky. And November the 11th, you're going to the Big Apple itself, New York City. And the crazy part is it looks like you've got the guest we were just talking about, Curtis Hughes, who's a famous, obviously Mr. Hughes, is going to be joining you in Conyers, and Brian Blair is going to be joining you in Tampa. Which I'm going to come back and ask you a couple questions on those guys. But make sure you get your tickets. They're at www.eventbrite.com, and that is event, and Bright is Brite. Just want to make sure you get that correct. That is www.eventbrite.com. And also remember, limited seating. So make sure you get your tickets absolutely early. Do not wait, because you do not want to get shut out and not get your tickets. So let's come back to that. Curtis Hughes, when you get your guest in, how do you kind of come up with them, and give me if you've got a good Curtis Hughes story or something like that, they can kind of a little tease, whet the appetite a little bit for them coming into the Conyers show.
Oh, Curtis and I have a history at WCW where we were on a lot of tours together in Europe. And he was, actually, he was a different person in WCW than he is now. I saw him not long ago in Philadelphia at a convention. And he came over to my booth, and, we chatted a little bit about, the times that we spent together. And he always fascinates me because, and we'll go into it at the show, he had been injured. He was headed towards pro football, and he had been injured. He transitioned over into wrestling. How that all happened and how he reacted to it is really the kernel of the story, which we'll talk about on stage. What I do is I tell all kinds of stories for 2 hours from my book, and I tell some stories that are not in my book. And then usually at the end of the show, the encore is a Q&A with the audience. And like you said, they're all small venues. I think Conyers, it maxes out at something like 90. So it's everybody is together. It's very much it's a celebration of pro wrestling. So we're all wrestling fans. So what I'll do is at the end of the show, instead of just me having a Q&A, Curtis will come on in, and he and I will have a discussion. Well, I'll reveal some things of that happened back when we were in WCW, and then the fans will have an opportunity to ask both of us questions. Same thing with Brian Blair in Tampa, and there will be more names that will be announced as we go along in different cities. So so that's how it works, because it's a set piece. It's not just Gary Cappetta telling stories. I have props, I have costume changes. It's a theater piece. And as I'm telling you stories, overhead on the giant screen, you're going to see what I'm talking about. Probably the best example would be, like, one of my greatest hits is the night in Munich, Germany, when Mick Foley lost his ear. So that was not a televised event. That was just a live WCW on-tour event. But there was a wrestling fan in Germany who snuck a camcorder into the show. And this, whoever it was, did a great job of capturing the entire match. Now, that was the night that the ear fell off of Mick Foley's head. And you see it. And you see the referee pick it up and flip it over to me. And then I'll add what happened to it when he gave it to me. I mean, essentially, I brought it backstage, and Ric Flair was in charge that night. And I come back, and Rick, I've got Cactus's ear in my hand. So I'll tell you what happened leading up to that match. I'll tell you what happened how Flair responded. Just things that go beyond what was in my book, essentially.
Absolutely. Those are, like I said, that's why those are you want to hear the Curtis Hughes story. You want to hear the Mick Foley story, that kind of stuff. That's why you definitely want to go to www.eventbrite.com. And remember, it's October 13th in Conyers, October 14th in Tampa, Florida, October 15th, Orlando, October 28th in Asbury Park, New Jersey, November the 4th, Louisville, Kentucky, and November the 11th in New York City. And you brought up Brian Blair again, kind of the same thing. I grew up, the Killer Bees. And the funny part is I'm going to ask you a question, because I grew up in Atlanta. We had a show here that was called Superstars of Wrestling, Joe Pedicino, Bonnie Blackstone. I don't know if you remember that show, because I know you were all over the place.
I do remember. Mm-hmm.
And we were luckily enough, we had world-class wrestling, NWA, AWA, Memphis Wrestling, Continental, all this on one channel. And the crazy part is you're one of the few, if not the only man that I remember, you worked for AWA, NWA, and WWF all at the same time.
That's people's biggest complaint. Gary Cappetta, we never could get away from you. I taught school for a lot of those years. So you can imagine my students Monday to Friday in class, and then being home on Saturday and turning on the TV, and there I am again. People just couldn't get away from me. I transitioned I spent 11 years with the McMahon family, and on stage I will talk about the family. I will spotlight and I'm not going to reveal who it is today, but who I feel is the most interesting member of that family. And people who have heard my interviews and know me, they know that I don't mince words, and I will just tell you exactly what I think, but I'll always have a reason, and I'll give you experiences that I've had with people in that family, or in wrestling in general. So when I transitioned after 11 years with the WWF at the time, it was not no, I wasn't fired, and I didn't quit. So it was a very gradual transition. And in the meantime, I was contacted by the AWA and the NWA, who had Pro Wrestling USA at the time. If you remember, I think Pedicino and Gordon Soley maybe were the hosts of that show. And so I hold the distinction of being the only person to ever work for the WWF, the AWA, and the NWA all at the same time. Because Pro Wrestling USA, AWA, Crockett, and Gagne were invading the Northeast at the time. So I would announce at the same arena for all three promotions, on different nights, but I stopped it. I realized that I was losing credibility, by coming into the same arena in front of the same fans and saying, "Tonight you're going to see the greatest wrestlers in the world." And then 2 weeks later, when I was with the opposition, saying the same thing. And it's like, no, this is, if there's one thing that I've developed over my first 11 years, it's I created a credibility with the fans that when I said something in center ring, they believed me. And I didn't want to destroy that. So I just pulled out of my WWF engagements and transitioned over to Vern Gagne's ESPN wrestling show. But yeah, you're right. That during that one, it didn't last long because I just didn't think it was good for my career. But I did work for all three at the same time.
In hindsight, and this is kind of a hard question to answer probably, in hindsight, when you chose to pull out of the WWF, do you ever kind of hindsight look back at your career and say, had I stayed with the WWF at that time, how different would my career be? Absolutely not. I don't wonder about it for a second because I know exactly what I would never have stayed with them full time. I was teaching school, and I was teaching high school, and I had a very solid 9-to-5 job that had benefits and pension and security. So at the time, nobody could have ever envisioned that the McMahons would have created the mega corporation that they did. So given my choices and the history of wrestling up till that point and the uncertainty of it, I would have never left my teaching job. So it might have been a mistake, but based on the information that I had at the time, I would not have gone full time. It wasn't until I was teaching 15 years before I left the classroom and went full time in wrestling, and that was only because Ted Turner bought the NWA. So I felt that Turner Broadcasting was a solid organization, and that there might be some longevity there. So no, I don't regret it. I mean, I don't at all because that's the information that I had at the time. Totally respect that. My wife is a school teacher. She's 19 years in. So, and I agree that I can't think of a reason why she would leave, at this point. So that would be a difficult call to make. Even if the money was great, I always tell people there's a long-term plan that you got to think of. Absolutely. But you brought up working for Turner. So you come over and you're working for Turner. Kind of how did that, as far as the differences between if you're working, for WWF, AWA, all those guys, and you come over just for Turner. And I'm going to follow up question with a venue that I'm really got the history on, but I want to ask you just kind of when you came over to Turner, did you see, cause you always hear stories of guys going, well, once I came to work for Turner, I realized, it wasn't what I thought. Yeah. What were your thoughts? I was actually closer to, the wrestling company that I was working for when I was working for Turner, because once again, I was full time. When I was I actually worked for Gorilla Monsoon. He was my mentor. He's the one that's responsible for my 43 years association with wrestling. I love the man. He was top notch. Treated me so well. And I will pay tribute to him. People will see at the stage show, they will see backstage at home video of Monsoon that has never ever been shown before in any theater. But I digress. So once again, I was doing my ring announcing and then leaving the arena to get home to be in the classroom the next morning. So my association with the wrestlers in the WWF and management was limited because I just came in, did my job, and left to get back to prepare for my other job, as opposed to WCW where I lived the life and I was on the road all the time. So I had more interpersonal relationships with people in wrestling when I was with WCW. So that it was very different because my job was different, my role was different. And I also, in addition to doing ring announcing, I did other work behind the scenes for WCW that many people don't know about. So, they were just very different jobs, different positions. Now, you go over some of that in the shows, at like the Beyond Body Slam shows, like the one October 13th in Conyers, Georgia, October 14th in Tampa, Florida, October 15th in Orlando, October 28th, Asbury Park, New Jersey, November 4th, Louisville, Kentucky, November the 11th in New York City. And remember, you get those tickets at www.eventbrite.com. That is event and then BRITE.com. And you've mentioned it once, small venues, limited seating. Get them now. Get your tickets early. Do not wait. They will be gone, I assure you. So like I said, is that where you tell some of those stories, like your other duties that you did there? Or if you want to do it here, what other duties did you have?
I was a commentator for the Spanish edition of the WCW show. So they would wipe off like Tony Schiavone's voice or Jim Ross's voice, and I'd go in the studio and just dub over for the Latin American audience and for KCAL in Los Angeles. And I would do that once a week. I'd have to be in the studio to record that. For a while, I produced the market-specific interviews. For a while, I hosted the event center. So I had done a lot of different things. I sold sponsorships at one point for our live events. So I was involved in different kinds of activities when I was with WCW.
And that seems to be, you hear that a lot. If you were a TV personality, non-wrestler, there was always something else. They hired you for this and this. It seems to be the case.
Yeah, and I sought that because I loved being on the road, and I just love wrestling and I love ring announcing. But what I did was very repetitive. A name away place, a time limit. Stipulations for a match. So it wasn't the most creative way to spend my time. So while I wanted to continue to do that, I always had an itch to contribute a little bit more. So those were just some of the ways that I was able to do it.
Absolutely. And I can imagine because I know I come back to the reward my wife gets from teaching. And so I can imagine that you needed something as far as that reward feeling and being creative and productive outside of, like you said, just stepping into the ring and reading off of a card. Or I'm sure by the point at the end, you didn't need the cards anymore because obviously you knew everybody, at that point by name, heart, weight, everything. So,
well, you remember it was pre-Twitter, it was pre-Facebook, it was pre-internet. So it wasn't only that I was announcing a name, a way to place. We would do the same show for a month from city to city to city.
Right.
And folks in New York didn't know that Atlanta had just seen the show. So it wasn't just that what I did was repetitive, it was the entire presentation that was the same, following the storylines that people were seeing on TV. And that, I am not complaining at all. I'm blessed to have been part of it. It's just that I sought something a little bit different to keep my interest up.
Absolutely. I totally, even with this, I always tell people, you got to try to improve. You're looking for the next thing, the creative juices to keep flowing. So I can totally appreciate that. But while you were at WCW, I know there's the Center Stage Theaters, the historic, building down here. I didn't say it was the nicest building all the way. I didn't say that. But there's so much history. I was just down there recently for a, Ring of Honor taping that I happened to go down and interview somebody at. But it was just standing in that building. It was funny. I was with a wrestler and we were like the history that's in that building. And I know you called that building, you announced at that building, correct?
Absolutely. Yes. Just about every other week or every 3 weeks or so. Yes.
Hey, give me a little story about just, cause even by the time you come in there, I know just like I said, I think it was every couple of weeks, they would just do long TV taping. So I know you're there. All the wrestlers are there. It's just give a little scoop about the history in Atlanta wrestling that you were there.
Well, that was a good example of, we had this very much, the same fans every taping, every time we were there. So I had developed a relationship with the folks. One of my roles was, to get everybody, jazzed up and cheering for when we went on the air. So I can't do that by myself. I can't make people do that. And I was always trying to be creative as to get folks to join in, and be part of that and to be on television, And there's a skill to that, to having an interaction with folks, and it happens at buildings that you go to on a regular basis. So for me, in my formative years, would have been the Meadowlands, it would have been Philadelphia. Then when I was transitioning into the NWA, it would have been Baltimore. And then as we were doing the TV tapings, there were certain arenas in Gainesville, Marietta, Center Stage, as you said. So actually, Center Stage was the last TV taping that I did before my final contract expired, and I had a little conversation with the folks there from Center Ring on mic, about leaving the organization, and that David Penzer would be picking up where I left off. And when I was a kid, I would go to the shows. Bruno Sammartino would always, be defending his title, and he would have, they would build up as this huge monster against him, and then after they had their run in the large arenas, that monster would disappear, and you never had any reason why or where did he go, and I always found that to be annoying. So when I knew that I wasn't going to be at Center Stage anymore, I told the people, that David's going to be taking over, and I won't be returning, and I wanted to thank them, for cooperating with me. They were, if I couldn't get the folks to respond to me, management would have said, Cappetta, don't you know how to do a job? You know what I'm saying? So it's the people were integral, they were so enmeshed in making that show appear more exciting maybe than it really was as you're sitting there, which is what was lost when we went to Disney MGM. And essentially, the folks that were in the audience there, a lot of them, they weren't wrestling fans. They were just there to go to the Disney park, and this was part of their tour. So I would have to explain to them when to boo and when to cheer, because they didn't have a clue who Ric Flair was, or Sting was, or Lex Luger, or the Steiner brothers, etc. And that was just not good. That just, if a reaction doesn't come, even though I'm saying, okay, cheer now, but as the matches went on, obviously the people in Atlanta were reacting from their gut. You can't duplicate that. And that's, I think, is what's missing quite often today in today's audiences, is that they're being told what to do. It's like a concert feel, where everybody's hands go up at the same time, everybody chants the same thing. It's very different from the experience, back during the time that you and I are talking about, Nick. And it's just very, very different. It's just an automatic response based on your emotions from back then, and you're not using your head. And today it's like, oh, I have to think. Oh, there's Daniel Bryan. Oh, my arm should go up in the air. It's just totally different.
Back then it was, and it's funny, there's certain buzzwords you hear a lot when we talk about the good old days of wrestling, and, organic is the one that always comes up, that there's, instead of being forced, pushed, programmed, maybe if that's what you want to call it, the audience, instead of just, what was your gut reaction? And one of it, sometimes I always tell people the internet was the best and the worst thing that ever happened to wrestling, because we all became too smart.
I understand, and I agree with you. But then again, I also want to say that I'm not like an old guy that's down on today's wrestling. What I described to you that everybody can see on Monday and Tuesday night with the WWE, that's what they want. That's what the promotion wants. The promotion doesn't want, for instance, an expressive ring announcer. They want a ring announcer that follows a pattern. John Cena, it's just like it's always the same. Roman Reigns, so they are very successful in achieving what the product that they want. I think you and I would just say that that's not our cup of tea. It's not any knock on the announcers or the wrestlers, because they are doing what they're instructed to do. I'd be the first one to say that today's wrestler is so much more athletic than the typical wrestler of the 60s, 70s, 80s. There's no doubt about it. They're in incredible shape. And if you could combine the athleticism of today's wrestler with the psychology of yesterday's wrestler and let them do it, and like you said, be spontaneous about it, oh my God, can you imagine the product you would have? It would be through the roof.
I had the pleasure of sitting in, and he doesn't mind me, saying that it was an Al Snow seminar, and he absolutely said that exact thing. He was like, it doesn't matter what you can physically do in the ring. If you don't connect and you can't suck those people in, it's all wasted motion. And, Dusty Rhodes was not the worker, quote unquote, as a lot of people say, in the sense of moves, even flashy moves. But I tell people all the time, Dusty Rhodes is my favorite wrestler of all time. I mean, hands down, it's not even close. And because I remember the first, on TV, that memory I mentioned to you off air about my great grandfather was Dusty, reaching out to the TV for help. And me as a 3-year-old going, somebody help him, kind of that kind of thing, and that's the connection. And it just seems to be a lost art at this point.
Yes. As a Northeastern boy, same thing with Bruno Sammartino. He was not a great technical wrestler. He was a brawler. He was, but when he got on those interviews and he looked at me, and I'm looking at him on television, and he looked at me, and I'm in 6th grade, and he says to me, I need your support. I need your help. I'm going to be at the Armory this weekend, and I need for you to be there. I thought that if I didn't go and cheer him, he might lose his title. It's very much the same. He's the one, like Dusty for you, Bruno for me, he got me hooked on wrestling. He was my hero, and then for years later to introduce him and get to know him was just a once-in-a-lifetime kind of opportunity.
100%. I understand. I mean, like I said, if my wife, I'm a very cold-hearted man. She says sometimes it's not true, but when Dusty passed, she said, I've never, ever seen you cry when a celebrity of some kind passes. And I just stood in the bathroom and I just cried. And she was like, why? And I'm like, I can't explain it. Dusty connected on a level that I just could not explain to a single, and I just couldn't put words to it. And that's the same with Bruno with you. It's just when he reached out to the TV and was like, reach out, touch my hand. I mean, I'm literally remember being a kid reaching for the TV going like, I'll be there. I'll be there. Yeah. Just like you said with Bruno.
Yep. Absolutely. So you understand, like totally. And that's what we're going to do at my stage shows. We're going to celebrate being wrestling fans. And it's like we're going to hold nothing back. I'm going to go into the audience a couple times. It's very interactive. And I'll tell you right now, I'm going to ask the audience, so all the folks that are going to come see me, you don't have to think too much about this because you know the answer. I want to know what brought you to pro wrestling. Like, what was it that inspired you and hooked you? And then I'm going to share my story. So we're just going to have a great time doing it.
That's what it's all about, celebrating being wrestling fans, hearing some great stories, especially from somebody who got to live that, that life. And so definitely you want to check out Beyond Body Slams, October 13th in Conyers, Georgia, October 14th in Tampa, Florida, October 15th in Orlando, October 28th in Asbury Park, New Jersey, November 4th, Louisville, Kentucky, and November the 11th in New York City. And remember, that is www.eventbrite.com. That is event, Brite. I want to make sure you get that correct. And always, like we've said, we can't emphasize enough, limited seating. So make sure you get your tickets early so you don't get shut out and you get a chance to hear some of these great stories, with all of these guys. And remember, Curtis Hughes will be at the Conyers show, just outside of Atlanta, and Brian Blair right now will be at Tampa, and more stars to come to the other locations. And if they want to find out where they can see who's coming, I know I always catch them on your Facebook page. Let them know where you're, where do they can, at Facebook, where they can find you and all that good stuff. Yeah,
Facebook is really the main place where I have all of the events listed on my event page of my Facebook site. So it's my initials, GMC, the number 4, Real. So it's facebook.com, GMC, number 4, Real. GMC for Real. And that's really the best place. I'm on Twitter too. But, I have too much to say. I can't limit myself to the Twitter rules. So Facebook's my favorite place.
Well, definitely check him out on Facebook. That's like I said, and also if you ever follow us as well, because I'm retweeting as much as I possibly can of all of the shows as the information comes up, trying to get it out there to make sure everybody catches all those shows. Remember, it's www.eventbrite.com. That is eventbrite.com, and catch the shows. Like I said, we've gone over them several times, but real quick again, I'll give them to you. October 13th in Conyers, Georgia, the October 14th, Tampa, Florida, October 15th in Orlando, October 28th, Asbury Park, New Jersey, November 4th, Louisville, Kentucky, and November the 11th in New York City. Well, Mr. Cappetta, it's been an absolute honor, and I can't stress that enough to you to have you on with me.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And, you know, I don't want to hear any of the fans tell me, oh, I would have gone, but, oh, it's 40 minutes away, or it's an hour away. GMC's driving 16 hours to come see you guys. So you better show up. I want to see you. I want to meet you. With a lot of people, I want to reconnect. You know, folks that I knew when I was announcing at Center Stage, or in Orlando at Disney, or in Tampa at the Bayfront Center. I mean, those were regular stops for me. So I made a lot of friends along the way, and I'm really looking forward to connecting with everyone. We're just going to have a hell of a time. You know, I didn't understand this at first, but when I did my first tour in February and March, the number one reaction that people had leaving the theater was, man, that was a lot of fun. And to tell you the truth, I didn't think, because I'm not a comedian, although it's entertaining and it's funny in, you know, some places, but it was just like bringing back so many memories. I think is a joy for people, and that they can be here in the theater with me and ask questions that maybe they've had for a long time, and if I know the answers, you know, I'll tell you what the experiences were. You know, what happened. For instance, there's an NWA Great American Bash Tour video. And when I say video, I mean behind the scenes in the dressing room, from when we were on the road with Dusty Rhodes and the Road Warriors and Jimmy Garvin and Paul Ellering. And so these are things you're not going to see anywhere else. So the giant screen video is a huge part of my show. And Nick, I thank you very much for your time helping me get the word out about this is a joy to come out and do it. I love it. I love doing the show.
Well, it sounds like you said, it's fun. That's the biggest thing. If you can leave anything in your life at this point and say you had a great time and then you enjoyed it, it's well worth the price of admission. Remember, www.eventbrite.com. Check him out, Mr. Gary Michael Cappetta, Beyond Body Slams. It's absolutely, if it's in your area, you do not want to miss it. So check it out. So, Mr. Cappetta, once again, it's been an honor, and I appreciate your time coming on, and it was an absolute honor to help in any way possible. So you take care now.
Thank you, Nick.
You're welcome.
Be sure that when if you get down to Orlando and you come to the show, just identify yourself so that I know you and I can shake your hand and thank you in person for helping me get the word out.
Once again, I would like to thank Mr. Gary Michael Cappetta for joining us today. Definitely make sure you head out. He does have a lot of shows on the schedule, but we want to hit right on these at, remember, October 13th in Conyers, Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. October 14th, it's in Tampa, Florida. October 15th is Orlando, Florida. The 28th of October is Asbury Park, New Jersey. November the 4th is Louisville, Kentucky. And November the 11th is New York City itself. And like we said several times, we really want to stress the fact that these buildings are limited seating available, so you want to buy your tickets early and don't get, left out, because like I said, you probably heard some of the teases, some of the stories you're going to get. Phenomenal stories. I've been in the business for a long, long time, so he's got lots of stories to share, and done in a presentation that's not just him standing up there telling the stories as you heard. So definitely head over to www.eventbrite.com. That is event and then brite.com. Get your tickets now and head on over to catch Gary Michael Cappetta's Beyond Body Slam show. And definitely, it's like I said, it's well worth the price of admission. But if you want to check us out, guys, obviously, if you like guests that we have like Mr. Cappetta, or you have any questions, kind of anything like that, you can always reach out to us at Tapped Out Pod on Twitter, Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast Network on Facebook. And of course, you can always get us at tappedoutpod@gmail.com. That is tappedoutpod@gmail.com, where you can find us on our website at tappedoutvwrestlingpodcast.com. And on there, of course, you can find all the places you can subscribe to the show, because that's what we're at. If you like these shows, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss any of them. We have a show drop every day, and that's, we're on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, you name it, we're on it. So you definitely want to check it out. But we ask subscribe, and anywhere you can, especially on iTunes, if you can give us that 5-star rating review, we'd appreciate it. And then, also we always have on our webpage, we have affiliate links for the Fight app. You definitely want to click on there. It's a great place to check out, lots of different, wrestling promotions that you can find, like our friends over at Rocky Mountain Pro, Booker T's Reality Wrestling's on there now, Rockstar Pro's on there, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. Like I said, tons of promotions. Just click on our link, download that app, and then you're off. I mean, it's a free app. It doesn't cost you a dime. Of course, we have our Amazon affiliate link. Click on there, replace your Amazon.com link with ours. And, basically all it does, they kick us a little referral fee for sending traffic their way. And it helps support the show without you having to come out and shell any money directly to us. Of course, we also have ProWrestlingTees.com. You can go over there, buy a shirt, directly the money kicks straight to us. So that's another way. Plus you get a cool shirt out of it. So definitely check it out, and then check out our friends over at BlueApron.com. You can click on the website and get some really fresh food. It comes to your house. No extra buying. Worry about it, what ingredients you need. Everything's in the box. It's just real simple. Open it up. Everything's in there, and the directions, so you can you can cook it. No excuses, like it's too hard to cook or anything. So you're good to go with a one-stop shop. But man, once again, we'd like to thank Gary Michael Cappetta. It's been an absolute blast having him on. Look forward to talking to him again soon. But with that, man, it's time for Tap Out.